Recorded Books presents Gullah Spirituals, The Sound of Freedom and Protest in the South Carolina Sea Islands, by Eric Crawford with Bessie Foster Crawford, narrated by Korey Jackson. Introduction. The old sheep done know the road. The old sheep done know the road. The old sheep done know the road. The young lamb must find the way. St. Helena Negro Spiritual. Each time I hear this popular refrain from St. Helena Island, South Carolina, I think of those elderly singers on the island who continue a Gullah song tradition with unbroken ties to America's slavery past. Indeed, they still remember traveling to church services by mule and watching their mothers and grandmothers singing and moving in the emotionally charged ring shout. Some can even recall singing more dignified spirituals during chapel services at Penn Normal Industrial and Agricultural School, one of the earliest educational institutions for newly freed slaves in the South. Yet readers will discover that these spirituals traveled well beyond St. Helena Island's shores. Remarkably, these songs persevered despite the immense emotional and physical atrocities of the transatlantic slave trade and southern plantation life to influence many of the major events in American history. My initial interest in St. Helena Island spirituals stemmed from a thesis entitled Music Education Through Gullah, The Legacy of a Forgotten Genre, by former student Marianne Rice. She grew up near St. Helena Island, and her mother, Marlena Smalls, is a well-known singer, actress, and educator. Marianne wrote about Gullah's ties to West Africa and the many well-known Gullah spirituals from the island, revealing a culture whose contributions to American history have been largely unacknowledged. Her writing caused me to reflect upon my undergraduate years at a historically black college and university, HBCU, where there was surprisingly little, if any, mention of Gullah culture in my classes, including the university's choir, where spirituals were a staple of our musical repertoire. This awakening moment was the driving force in my decision to visit St. Helena Island in the summer of 2009. When I arrived on St. Helena Island in Beaufort County, South Carolina, I was struck by its scenic marshlands, unspoiled beaches, and tree-lined roads defined by the hanging Spanish moss. Undoubtedly, such elements contributed to a much slower pace of life, and residents drove their cars below the speed limit so they could wave to the many walkers on the side of the road. It is obvious that they still remembered when walking was the norm and not the exception. I attended a Sunday morning worship service at historic Brick Baptist Church on St. Helena Island, where I anticipated hearing some of the old spirituals. Before the Civil War, plantation owners brought their enslaved laborers to Brick Baptist to Christianize them and remove their perceived heathenish practices. These enslaved Africans had to sit unseen in the upstairs balcony, but they still took an active role in the congregational singing, especially the Europeanized hymns that would later serve as free musical material for their Negro spirituals. To my dismay, I heard none of the Gullah spirituals during Brick Baptist worship service, only hymns and popular gospel songs. However, a kind church member informed me of an evening praise house service not far away where I might hear the old songs. I vividly remembered hearing Deacon James Garfield Smalls fervently raise several of his songs at the Jenkins Praise House, one of two praise houses still holding Sunday evening services. His voice swept through this tiny wooden structure with a force that seemed to bring us all back to the bygone era of slavery when Negro spirituals were first forged. Indeed, such singing seemed to honor all those who had come before, and I felt an instant connection to my own childhood as a kid growing up in Millington, Tennessee, where I attended St. James Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. After 40 years, I can still recall the foot-tapping of my pastor's wife to the cadence of her husband's sermons and the ever-present congregational responses of "Amen" and "Preach, Pastor." My own cultural past found a kinship and common ground within this praise house. A few months later, I returned to the island and attended another service at Jenkins Praise House featuring a guest singer named Minnie Gracie Gadsden.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?